Memento mori. In ancient Rome, usually after a victorious battle, a popular Roman general, or the emperor himself, would be given a triumphal procession on a horse-drawn carriage through the capital city of a mighty empire. There will be monuments built for their glory. You can see it in the city of Rome today, with Trajan's Column, the Arch of Constantine, the Arch of Titus, or even the Arc de Triomphe in France, which was under Napoleon's era, I believe. A general who was that popular, with people cheering his name, and he was probably wearing a crown of victory, would probably have felt like a god. Now, in the carriage with him, there would also be a slave. His purpose would be to stand behind him to whisper in Latin, memento mori. You may have heard this translated as, remember thou art mortal, but more literally, it is translated into, remember that you will die. Death is a reality, a concerning reality. 50, 60 years ago, there were certain subjects you just didn't talk about. Today, death is one of those things considered taboo. It's a reality we all face, and it's actually the great equalizer. We all will die, whether you are a homeless person or Elon Musk himself. Yes, it's true, our lives are going to end. But as people of faith, we know that death does not have the final say. Death is not our ruler. Christ is. Death is rather now a conquered captive, preparing us for something beautiful. It's the first part of the last four things that Monsignor talked about in his homily last week. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell. We will die, we will face judgment. So what we do moving forward matters. What we believe matters in our head and in the heart. Turning back to God does matter. Now, if we look at this through a purely natural lens, we see that death also doesn't have the final say, in a manner of speaking. Open up a history book. You will see the names of events, of persons, of peoples. They died, but their legacy lives on. For example, during the American Civil War, in the early 1860s, Governor John Andrew of Massachusetts, together with Frederick Douglass, helped create an all-African American regiment. They are known as the 54th Infantry, and they were led by the son of abolitionists, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. Abolitionists were those who also wanted to tell the institution of slavery memento mori. And they were instrumental in helping President Lincoln at the time turn the war from being simply to preserve the Union to a war to end slavery, freedom for all in this new United States. The regiment is depicted in the 1989 war film, Glory, with Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, who is the descendant of slaves, and Morgan Freeman. Towards the end of the film, the regiment is given a nearly impossible task. Go to South Carolina and take the Confederate stronghold, Fort Wagner. If they take the fort, they can march on to Charleston and end the war quickly. When they assemble the regiment on the beach, at least in the film as depicted, Colonel Shaw gets off his horse and goes off by himself. He experiences a memento mori moment. And Matthew Broderick plays this masterfully. You don't see him in the movie as Ferris Bueller wearing a Union uniform, but rather he transforms into Robert Shaw. He looks out into the horizon, the sunset, and you can tell it on his face. There's no dialogue. He knows that he and most of his men will die trying to take the fort. But they march forward anyway, together. He wasn't on his horse. He ran alongside his men. earning their love and respect. Many men died that day at that battle, but they saw it as a moment worth dying for. They died for freedom and uniting a broken country. Their legacy lived on while they did not. They were so inspirational that 180,000 African American men joined the Union Army and helped turn the tide of the war, according to Abraham Lincoln. In the story of ancient Israel, we also see the legacy of a person whose name lives on after he passed away. He fought many battles, united a people. He was loved so much by God that God literally entered into his bloodline so that Jesus would have a literal royal link to King David. As a child, I loved the story of David, the shepherd boy of Bethlehem who slayed a giant with a pebble, who escaped the clutches of King Saul, who united a people, who built this little nothing nation into an empire. But there was a problem. David died. The one enemy he could not conquer was death. But Christ the King conquered death. When he was living and teaching on earth, the Jewish people at the time were waiting for another Davidic Messiah to come, to build an earthly kingdom and destroy the Romans once and for all. A Messiah did come from David's line, and he was triumphantly crowned with thorns. And he carried his cross up a hill in a victorious procession, enthroned on his cross at Golgotha. And while he was conquering death, he bestowed kingly mercy on a criminal. That whole time, no one whispered behind him, "Memento mori." The beauty of the existence of heaven and hell is that while it's kind of a terrifying notion of where we might end up, we're not a condemned people anymore. We are sinful, of course. All of you have your struggles. I have my struggles too. But through Christ, we are no longer condemned. Our crucified King is ready and willing to bestow mercy, even at the hour of death. He freed us. He fought for our freedom, from slavery to sin and death. He carried that cross up the hill, and he knew, if he doesn't go up there, if he doesn't do this, we're lost, forever broken and forever gone. All he asks of us is to return to him. It might be now, it may not even be until the hour of death, like the thief on the cross. Look at the crucifix, or look at the crucifix in your homes, and reflect on this. Look at his position. His arms are in agony, outstretched. The Romans in their cruelty perfected torture. And yet at the same time, it's an open embrace, ready to take any sinner who wants to come back. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the Christology of St. Luke is that Christ is the King and Savior of all humanity, of the Romans, of King David, of the 54th Infantry, of Jews and of Gentiles. Knowing that we're going to die and be judged, Jesus is always here alongside us, like Colonel Shaw with his men, and literally present in the Eucharist. He wants to bring us into his glory, a life with him in the heavenly kingdom. We should joyfully prepare to go to be with him at the end of our lives. Don't be afraid of memento mori, because while we are mortals, we are loved by the immortal Christ the King.